Welcome back, everyone, and welcome back to a session that I've been looking forward to all week. Rita Clifton has been called the doyenne of branding by Campaign magazine and brand guru by the Sunday Times. She graduated from Cambridge University and started her career in advertising, where she became vice chairman and strategy director at Saatchi & Saatchi in its most successful period. She then joined Interbrand, the leading global brand consultancy, as London's CEO, and later became chairman for a 10-year term. She now has a portfolio of chairing and non-executive director roles, including Nationwide Building Society, ASOS, and Essential. In 2014 New Year's Honours List, Rita was awarded a CBE for services to the creative industries. She has worked with leading businesses, retailers, organisations all around the world, and speaks on all aspects of branding, brands, and business leadership. It's absolutely fabulous to have Rita here. Rita, hello.
Hello, and thank you very much for that introduction.
Well, I mean, it's extraordinary, actually, because we're here to talk about your new book, Love Your Imposter, and you read off that biography. And of course, actually, I've had the pleasure of you being a non-exec at a company I worked for many years, and know what an inspiration you were to many of the people who were working in that business, particularly many of the women in the organization. So the thought for, I think, myself and all of those people I know who've worked with you, that you might have some sort of imposter syndrome seems quite ludicrous, really.
Well, actually, what's so funny is when you do that introduction, it almost feels like it's talking about somebody else.
Right.
But I mean, you mentioned the imposter syndrome and, the fact that I experience it. I mean, there's almost no surprise. I mean, something like 70% of people say that they have these sort of imposter feelings. And some really high profile, famous and successful people do that as well. So Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, Tom Hanks, Emma Watson, Olivia Colman, all of these are people who talk about having the imposter syndrome. In fact, even more than that. I seem to remember Olivia Colman talking about every time she goes onto a job, she thinks she might get fired. I mean, this is the kind of, can I do it feeling, these quite normal feelings of insecurity or inadequacy and stuff like that. And do you know, sometimes, even though these feelings can't be let out of control, they can actually be quite a useful drive to succeed. So actually, a lot of successful people have this syndrome and have found a way even of harnessing what some of those feelings can give you. And I've personally found that quite useful at times in my career as well. It's just a bit tiring. And again, you mustn't let it get out of control, because then you can need a bit of help.
Absolutely. And I suspect there's people, everyone watching this, I'm sure, find that very heartening to feel that they're not alone with this. But how does it manifest with you, for example?
Well, it's interesting. It often manifests with me when I'm about to do something that is new or different, or a promotion, or going somewhere that, you think, oh my goodness, this is a moment where I've got to really step up. So the first time I can remember having it quite intensely was when I first went to university. I went to a state grammar school, and I managed to get into Cambridge because a teacher at school thought that I might be capable of going. And I arrived in Cambridge with a battered old car because we didn't have a family car. And it was set off quite nicely by a row of rather more expensive cars, dispensing people who came from good schools and richer backgrounds and all those things. But do you know, having experienced that, when I came into contact with Hillary Clinton, and frankly, a moment of imposter syndrome was when Hillary Clinton endorsed my book. I mean, and one of the reasons that she felt able to do that is because she talked about when she first went to Wellesley College, she was looking around thinking, there are so many other smarter women than me. So, I've had these feelings, and sometimes I think, this time is going to be the time that it all goes pear-shaped, that someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, you don't really deserve to be here, or otherwise you should step aside for someone who really knows what they're doing. But do you know, what you find is a lot of people don't think that they know what they're doing either. So let's all recognise that we can all feel that way. And actually, it's a very, very human thing. If 7% of people have got it, you go, actually, maybe this is more like a syndrome of just being human.
Absolutely.
And being human, funnily enough, is exactly what we need a lot more of in the business world right now. It's good for business itself, and it's good for us all as human beings.
Well, absolutely. And actually, I was struck reading your book. First of all, it feels, obviously, it's a very personal account and aimed at helping individuals who are maybe held back by this feeling. But also, it felt like a bit of a call to arms to me as well, particularly towards the end of the book. And I loved the fact that you used the analogy of a zombie movie, Warm Bodies, to kind of talk about what you hoped might happen in business. Did you want to explain a little bit about that?
Oh, look, this sounds really, really weird, doesn't it? And it's one of those things where, I watched all the Twilight movies, for example. I don't know whether any of people watching this did happen to watch Robert Pattinson in the Twilight movies. It's a sort of a slightly inappropriate film for women of a certain age. However, I'm a bit of a sucker for rom-coms, and I happen to be watching one called Warm Bodies that actually happens to star Nicholas Hoult, and he's sort of playing the romantic hero, male hero, and he happens to be a zombie. I mean, like it happens. So it's a rom-com. And actually, look, the relevant part of the story is that as a zombie, he happens to fall in love with a human, a female human, and he sort of becomes human again. And what happens in the movie is that actually, other zombies are seeing this love story. They come back to life, they become warm-blooded and everything else. And the only people who don't come together in the end, as human beings again, are things called bonies, which are quite scary, skeleton-like creatures who've sort of gone beyond the pale, and they feed on everything with a pulse and a human heart. So, obvious allegory alert here. I think that those people who are wanting business to be a more humane place, a more human place to be, we need to come out as the human beings we are, with empathy, with all of the sort of messy feelings that human beings can get. And I'm not suggesting that you spend all of your day telling people, what you can't do and your problems and things like that. But what I do think is important, though, is sometimes to share with people that sometimes things don't go right. Sometimes you've made mistakes. And the important thing is, having said that, is then to help people, feel that they can get through that, or that there are things that they can do to improve. And I think that, I'm also honest in the book about when I was chief executive, for example, I didn't really love that job every day because it's relentless. No one ever wants less resource or, fewer people in their teams. Everybody wants more. And, as the chief executive, you have to make some very, very hard decisions and accept the fact that sometimes people aren't going to like some of your decisions. It can be a slightly miserable job. But as chief executive, as someone who runs a company, or indeed even as a manager, managing a few people, you can make things happen. And you can make some choices that you, I'm hoping as a decent human being, approve of. So I had equal numbers of men and women, for example, on my executive team. We had personal bursary programs. We did yoga, and we did a lot of self-development stuff. And I thought, it is worth it, to show that you can be, you can be a nurturing chief executive and help people improve. And actually that was worth it because it stretched me and it developed me in ways that actually has enabled me to do other things. So, as a manager, when you're looking after people, do it your own way. Do it your own way. But there are certain things that you can do to give you the confidence to do that well. And maybe we can talk about some of those in just a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and before we do, so why at the moment then do you feel it's important to bring some of the humanity back into the business world and make it more about people?
Well, I guess that there are, obvious things about making sure that we're looking after, the people who we manage or they're in our companies and so on, because, it's a tough old world. It's a tough old world with rapid changes that can make people feel either insecure or otherwise, anxious and worried. So I think we need to make all of our organisations more human, because actually looking after people as well is a very good way of looking after customers. If you look after your employees, they're more likely to look after, the customers on which your business depends. So I think that feels like a very important sort of, company culture thing. I think more broadly as well, though, the business world, if you like, brand business, has never been more mistrusted, despised. I mean, these are not good things for business in general, because if you don't present a human face to business, if you're not able to talk about the advantages of business and what it's doing for people, what happens is that politicians can want to give business a good kicking, because I think that they're going to get more votes out of giving business a good kicking than actually supporting business. And we need business to feel supported. We need the broader public opinion to be thinking that business is a good thing, because it is. I mean, if we don't have successful businesses, we don't have the money to pay for schools and hospitals and civil society. We just need good business. And what I'm saying is what we need from good business is businesses that look after people and that are led by people who look as though they care about other people. Business leaders with pulses and pets and families and a sense of humour even. These are important human things, and frankly, don't we need the world to be a bit more like that at the moment?
Absolutely. And I think there's a great, you quote Anita Roddick actually early in the book. There's a great quote about the fact that when they started Body Shop, they advertised for employees and people turned up, which I thought was a great way of putting it.
Absolutely. And I think I don't like terms like the staff, the employees, even the consumer. And I don't know about you, I've never met the consumer. I have met this rather sort of mythical character. I've met a lot of different people who consume different brands. I think the minute you start talking about the staff, the consumer, it makes you start thinking about people in almost like a third party thing to be observed. And that's not what we need. We need more human connections. We need better human-based relationships to build long-term successful businesses. And I think that's a really, really important change that we can all make in how we refer to people we work with and the customers we serve.
Absolutely. So how does one go about embracing the imposter? How do you go from trying to just shut it down to actually accepting it and using it as a power to further your career?
I think that there are a few things that you can do. And first and foremost, in my view, is about understanding yourself. And the reason for needing to understand yourself is not only to make sure that you really get what strengths you've got, what drives you, what you're good at, and so on. And if you don't have a deep understanding of yourself, then talk to friends. There are a lot of self-development programs as well online. I have to confess, I'm a slight self-development junkie myself. I've done some weird and wonderful things on the personal development front, but nevertheless, I found that quite useful to understand myself and what it was that I enjoyed and was good at. And also, again, what drove me, and the imposter thing, which I have tried to recognize now as a useful drive and strength. So understand yourself and get clear about those strengths, but also get clear about what it is that you need from your working life. Is it that you want to save the world? Is it that you need to earn short-term money? Is it you crave status, or is it that you want to nurture people? But get clear about some of those things first and foremost. Secondly, I think for us all, if you want to be long-term influential, you need to think about building your personal brand. And I don't mean about getting a hair done or your makeup or what you wear and so on, although that needs to do some justice to what you are trying to do in life. And we just have to recognise that personal presentation and communication is important. It's a normal part of the human condition, that actually we are influenced by what we see and what we feel and what we hear as well. So we need to train ourselves to be as good at communicating as we can be. This also gives you confidence. And there are certain tools and techniques that you can use on learning to be a good communicator. But even if you hate it, even if it gives you the screaming abdabs, it's good to keep on practicing. And there are things you can do to give you confidence. And there's quite a lot in the book. I hope that you noticed about what I'm suggesting, whether it's breathing techniques or it's how you use your eyes or voice and things like that. I think it's really, really important to do that. It's also very important to learn how business works and learn numbers. And the numbers thing I do talk quite a lot about in the book, because it's something I came to quite late in my working life, because it wasn't something that was a major part of my early jobs. But certainly if you want to get more senior, if you want to run departments or companies, getting to grips with the numbers and finance is something that is really, really useful as tools and again as confidence builders, because the language of the boardroom is finance, and you need to be able to understand that language if you're going to get there. So it really is worth putting some effort into that too. I think that just the last thing I might say, and this might seem a rather strange thing to say, but to recognise that healthy relationships, both inside but particularly outside the workplace, are really important to all of our sense of confidence and well-being. And I do say that because I know a lot of bright, intelligent, successful people, whether men or women, who, for whatever reason, have relationships with people who don't make them feel supported or good about themselves, that actually make them feel smaller or less confident than they could be. And I think it's more difficult, in your working life to be confident and successful if you don't feel you have that sort of relationship and support at home. And I'm talking both about, intimate relationships, but I'm also talking about friends and so on. I think we all know, those relationships that actually build us and those relationships that reduce us. And I guess that also comes back full circle to us all recognizing ourselves and understanding ourselves, which is that there are certain people who are radiators and certain people who are drains. And what I mean by that, and I'm sure people listening would recognize it, there are people who, when you're in a room with them, they light you up, they give you energy, and they make you feel as though you can do more. And there are also people who suck the oxygen from the room and reduce people's views about what's possible. They might be cynical, or they just might make themselves feel better by making other people feel smaller. And what I'm saying is you need to understand yourself, because if you have got stuff, if you've got issues, and you are visiting that stuff on people around you and not making them feel that they can do more, it's a good idea to do some work on yourself. And again, think about where some of those feelings come from. So there are certain things that you can do that will build confidence and also build your performance in the workplace too.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a strong strand through the book, of course, that imposter syndrome seems to affect women in a greater way than men. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think this is interesting. I mean, imposter syndrome is something that is experienced both by men and by women. Women seem to have it a bit more than guys, about 18% seemingly. And the reason for that seems to be partly that, there are societal contraindications about women being successful, i.e. you're not necessarily expected to progress and go right to the top. And frankly, that's borne out by the numbers. The number of women running organisations is still pathetically small, and we all need to make progress on that. And men feel that is as much as women, because the men I know prefer to work in a better balanced senior team. So that's really important. Also the fact that women tend to be more self-critical, whether that's by bias in their training or education or workplace and so on, but they tend to have less confidence than guys. And also they are better at sharing things. They are better at talking about them and recognizing them. Whereas for guys, seemingly they find it more difficult to talk about these things, more difficult to acknowledge them. And also scientific studies have suggested there is a testosterone effect, which actually tends to give guys a bit more confidence. And I think we notice this sometimes in job applications. I'm sure you've seen the data as I have, which is actually, men can want to, can put themselves forward for positions, even if they're not fully qualified for it. And women will tend not to put themselves forward if they're not completely qualified for it. So that does have some advantages for guys. On the other hand, what they can find is that sense of confidence, if it's dashed for whatever reason, they can suffer more from it. So everybody needs some help and support on this front, and everyone can suffer from it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Rita, one last question. You've talked very much about your brand and how you bring that to work, but how much of yourself should you bring to the workplace? How much of the imposter should you show to your colleagues or those people working around you?
Well, I think this is interesting. I mean, there's a chapter in the book called Why You Don't Have to Fake It to Make It. And this is something I really do feel strongly about, which is that this advice of, you've got to fake this or fake that or whatever, in my view, that just encourages people to think that somehow you've got to create this sort of third-party construct, almost like a corporate construct of yourself. And I recognise that because for a while when I was being CEO, I felt I had to pretend, I had to act the part of CEO, ass-kicking CEO and chewing concrete blocks for breakfast, etc. But if you act a part day in, day out in your working life, if you're not careful, you can make yourself, both miserable and sometimes ill. So you need to recognise, actually, this is not about faking. This is about learning tools and techniques and developing yourself and your knowledge and your skills to make the very best of yourself too. And to make the best of yourself and to be human sometimes means sharing stuff about yourself with others. I mean, what I find is that, particularly, we're not all perfect. That's a, sort of an amazing revelation. We are not all perfect, but we can keep on working on ourselves. There are certain things that I have found difficult in my working life. So, for example, getting things done, in a timely way. I used to be a terrible procrastinator. And actually, that's tied up with the imposter syndrome, I gather, from some studies. And so, therefore, saying to other people that you notice maybe don't get things done on time, sharing something of yourself, which is that, I used to struggle with this, and this is what I found was really useful. I think that those things are important. What you don't want to do is spend all day long saying to people, oh, I've got such problems, I'm so crap me, etc. You don't want to do that because that's not helpful to others, and it's not necessarily helpful to your own sense of moving on and confidence. What you should be thinking about is how to make the best of yourself, how to use some of those things that you have learned, to be more, to stretch yourself more, in some ways to go to your imposter, I know you, I recognise you, and I know why you're there, and I can, you can actually help me be better. So use it in a positive way. Love that imposter. Be your best self. That's human flaws and all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rita. Well, as I say, it's an absolutely fantastic book. As I said earlier, not just I think hugely helpful for anyone aspiring to get on in life, but also I think a passionate call to arms as well. And I loved there was one last quote in it that really struck home for me, because I think it rings so true with the work we're doing at the Trust, which was the world needs changing, business runs the world, so we need to change business. And I think we could all agree we could do with a little bit more humanity in our lives right now. I'm also delighted to say we've got 30 copies of Rita's book to give away to the first 30 people who email in after this session. It's a fabulous read, and I think you'll all love it. Rita, thank you so much for joining us. It's so kind of you to spend so much time with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.